Hi everyone, my name is Carmen from New Leaf Designs and welcome to the tutorial video for the opalite hat. In this video I will show you how to knit this colorwork cabled hat from start to finish. You'll need 2 balls of yarn, 1 ball of Scapious Stonewashed XXL and 1 ball of the Minerals colorways, which are the variegated ones. You'll need 2 needle sizes. I use 7mm needles for the brim and 8mm for the hat. You'll also need a cable needle, some stitch markers, pair of scissors, darning needle. That's it. All right, get the free pattern right here on my blog or via the link down below. Let's get knitting. So to start your hat, you will need the smaller of your 2 sets of needles. So I'm using my 7mm needles for the brim and then later on my 8mm for the hat itself, but it can be that you need different needle sizes if you knit to a different gauge. I'm going to use my yarn A, which is color Udialite 879, and Opal Ocean, which is color 906. And we are going to do German twisted cast on, which needs a long yarn tail. So we'll start by making a slip knot, and putting that onto our needle. And for the German twisted cast on, we have our yarn tail in front, our yarn that goes to the ball at the back here, and with our index finger and thumb we are going in between the 2 yarns, spreading them apart, and then gathering both threads in your other fingers. And then you tilt your hand like this so you can see a loop going around your thumb and a loop going around your index finger. With the needle tip, you go under both strands of the thumb loop. Then with the tip of the needle, you go in there, come right side up. You take the leftmost strand of the index finger loop and you pull it through that triangle over here. I'm going to do this a bunch more times, so don't worry. So go under both strands of the thumb, with the needle tip go in the gap of the thumb loop, come back up, take the index finger strand and pull that through that little triangle. And to make that easier, you can also take your index finger loop and then let go of your thumb loop and then move the loop over the strand that way. So that's going under the thumb loop, dipping in the thumb loop, coming up, grabbing the index finger strand, letting go of the thumb loop, and basically it already wants to go over that yarn, and then you take your thumb and tighten the yarn that way. So there are a couple of different ways to do this. Basically what we're doing is we're creating a twist in the thumb strand and then taking the index finger strand through that. And this is the German twisted cast on, which is also known as the Old Norwegian cast on. So depending on where you grew up, you might have heard it under the one name or the other. And we are going to cast on a number of stitches that it says in your pattern. I'm knitting the largest size, so I'm casting on 70 stitches. But do check the pattern. And again, that's a free pattern on my website. You can find it in the description, or I'll put a QR code on the screen. I've got my 70 stitches now, and to make it easier to join in the round later, we are just going to knit flat for 2 rows. So I'm turning my work so that my left-hand needle now has the yarn, and I'm going to knit in pattern, which is knit 1, purl 1. So I'm moving the yarn to the back so I can knit 1, then I'm moving my yarn to the front so I can purl. And I knit continental style. You might knit English style like this, where you wrap the yarn around with your hand and then also move it forward to purl. And you knit 1, then purl 1 all the way to the end of your stitches. And the last stitch will be a purl stitch. If your last stitch is a knit stitch, do check your stitches, because either you've messed up somehow with the knit 1, purl 1 pattern, or you've cast on a stitch too few or too many. So after your first row, you turn your work again, and then we knit another row of knit 1, purl 1. And at the end of round 2, we're going to join our work in the round so that we won't have to seam up the whole side of the hat. And you might notice that my needle is kind of long for this, and although it's probably possible for me to stretch the work all the way, I do not want to do that here, because then I will stretch my hat to be the length of this circular needle, which is 80 centimeters, and I don't want to make it that big. If you've got a short circular needle, such as 40 centimeters, then you can join in the round, no problem. But if you're working on a long circular needle like me, I'm going to show you how to do magic loop. So for magic loop, we basically bend our circular needle and take the cable out. So make sure you can see the cast on edge and that it's not twisted in any way. And then I'm going to pull on the cable so that I can move all of the stitches onto the needle. With this cable pulled out like that, I can actually bend it and I can continue knitting here. We are going to start row 3. That is also a knit 1, purl 1. And in order to not create a huge ladder here, what I like to do is I take a quilting clip, or you can take a washing pin, or you could even take a darning needle and put the yarn end through the other side. The thing that we want to do is we want to just temporarily clip these sides together so that we don't encourage a gap here. That's one of the tricks that I like to use for hat knitting. And in a while, this loop is going to move here as I knit more of these stitches, and I will show you what to do when you get there. See, this loop is moving its way to my left hand needle. You can keep knitting until there are no more stitches on your left hand needle. Like that. So now it will just kind of fall to the side. Then I redistribute my stitches on the needle, and you can either take a loop out here and move this back into your work, or you can move all of your stitches as far to the left as you can, so as far onto your holding needle as you can, so that you can form a loop with your right hand needle. And I know this might seem very, very difficult, and if so, please just pull out a loop in between your stitches and it will all be fine. But I sometimes do this because it allows me to just keep on knitting for as long as a stretch as possible. So I will insert my needle into the next stitch and I will just start knitting. And this loop will travel all the way to the left until you knit all of these stitches, and then your left needle falls away again. Okay, I might have lost track of how many rows we were doing, so let's see. It can be difficult to count how many rows you've already done because there's also the cast on row. So what I like to do with ribbing is to count the purl stitches, because the cast on will always appear as a knit stitch. So we've got the cast on here, this little stitch here, but the purl stitches, they will always appear as this horizontal little bar. So I know I've got 1, 2, 3 purl stitches, so that is 3 rows of knitting. And also, we just have one strand here where we joined our work in the round, which means we did one round after joining in the round. We are going to do another round. So let me just show you again what I do with that loop. So I've knit all of the stitches here. I move the stitches a little bit on my right hand needle or my working needle, and just after the working needle I'm pulling out the cable so that I can move my left needle tip into the stitches as well. And this traveling loop or magic loop is really wonderful because it allows you to knit small circumference items on long circular needles such as 80 centimeter or 100 centimeters, which means that you don't need a whole stash of needles for every single project. I've only got 80 centimeter needles in my collection, with a few exceptions, and it allows me to just buy fixed circulars, so I've no issues with joins coming undone or whatever. I really like my fixed circulars. It can simplify a lot of things, and it can save you a whole lot of money that you would have spent on needles with different cable lengths or interchangeable sets. Okay, we've done 4 rounds now, and we have one more round to knit. And if you'll check the pattern, you will see that for size 2, so the size with 62 stitches, you will need to increase 1 stitch at the end, just so that it all works out when we're doing our increase row later. But again, that only applies to size 2. So if you're knitting the smallest size, which is 56, or the largest size, which is 70 stitches, you just knit 1 more row. So for the size 2 special instructions, you knit until 2 stitches left, and then you make an increase. The increase is knit into the front and back of the same stitch. So you would make a knit stitch as you normally would, and then stop here. Don't let this slide off the left hand needle, but instead insert your needle into the back of that stitch as well, wrap your yarn around and pull through, and then you have made an increase. And then you would knit, or purl I mean, the last stitch. But I'm not knitting size 2, so I'll just undo that. And this is the same increase that we're using later on in the increase round. So at this point, I would suggest putting in a stitch marker. And you can use any stitch marker that will fit around the larger needle size that you're using. So I'll be using a 8mm, and you can use any stitch marker that will go over the needle. I'll be using this cute cat stitch marker that my friend gave me because it will slide right over. We have 1 more row around to knit on our smaller needles, and that is an increase round, so that we have enough stitches to knit our cable pattern on. And this increase round is specific for each size. So for size 1, you will knit 3, and then do the knit front and back increase. That is your repeat for size 1. For size 2, you will knit 2, then do the knit front and back increase. And for size 3, which is the one that I'm knitting, we will need to increase more often. So we'll just knit 1, then we'll do our knit front back, knit 2, and another knit front back. So that's knit 1, increase, knit 2, increase. And the way that you can keep track of your increases is if you spread your stitches apart a little bit, you can see we have this little purl bump in there. And that is the increase. That is the extra stitch, because with this one you see clearer. You see the knit stitch, which comes from this knit column right here. And then we have this extra purl stitch just tagging along there. So, and if you spread your stitches apart, you can also see that they tend to cluster together. Whereas regular stitches, you'll be able to spread them apart more easily. So you can see I've got 1 singular stitch here, an increase, 2 stitches, and an increase. And if you're ever in doubt, just go back to the absolute beginning of your row and start counting from there, because that's usually your safest bet to see that you're still on track. And at the end of the row or round, you should be finishing with an increase. And if for you end up with just a knit stitch, then chances are that you've miscounted somewhere, so do count that you've got the correct number of stitches. Okay, for the next round, I'm actually going to leave my stitch marker on pause here because we are going to be transferring to the other needle, which is an 8mm needle. So I was using a 7mm. I'm now transferring to an 8. And we are going to be knitting with our second color as well. For this row, we have our color A and our color B. And we have a 14 stitch repeat. So if you want, you can take some more stitch markers to help you count. And for this part, we have a written section and we have a charted section. It's very personal to each knitter which one you will prefer. I prefer the chart, but some people prefer the written pattern and others prefer to have the chart and written pattern there at the same time. And for beginners, I do recommend to have the written pattern and the chart there. I'm also just going to pop the chart somewhere on the screen, and we're going to focus on the very first row. So we read our chart from right to left. At the beginning, the written pattern says knit 2 in A. So it says K2A. That means we knit 2 with our color A. Then it says knit 3 B. That means the next 3 stitches are going to be with color B. So take your other color and knit 3 stitches. Okay, now we need to knit 2 stitches with color A again. So the written pattern says K2A, and I'm just going to read this first repeat from the written pattern, and then we're going to look at the chart. So our color A is all the way here. Now we have to reach across to knit with this color, but what you don't want to do is to smush your stitches together and knit, because these stitches will then pucker together because that short strand of yarn A is keeping them pushed together, and that will result in a bad fit and in a puckered fabric. So what we want to do is you want to spread out your stitches on the needle like that before reaching over with it. And we need to knit 2. And it might help to memorize that whenever in this pattern, whenever you're using yarn A, you'll always knit 2 stitches. Let's see, then we knit 2 with color B. And again, I'm inserting, spreading my stitches out, taking yarn B, reaching across, and I'm knitting. And in a minute, I'm going to show you how to hold these 2 yarns, one in each hand. But for now, we're just focusing on taking one at a time. So we've got yarn A again. That means we're knitting 2 stitches, inserting, spreading out, taking yarn A, and knitting. If you get a little bit lost, you can always go back to the beginning of your repeat, and you'll see you'll have knit 2A, knit 3B, knit 2A, 2B, 2A. And if you read that together with the written version, you'll get to where you are in the pattern. So the last couple stitches of the repeat, we reach across and knit 3 stitches with color B. Okay, now here's where I'm going to place a stitch marker. So I'm just taking a stitch marker and it goes over the needle, and that's where I know, okay, this is my my checkpoint. Okay, now we're gonna knit from the chart. So I'll put the chart on the screen and we can see the first 2 blocks. So you see 14 squares on your chart. Each square is a stitch, and you can see the color A squares and the color B squares. And the color A squares are these, it's a kind of medium purple square, and the color B squares is a lighter color. So we start with 2 squares of color A. So we knit that. Then 3 squares of color B. 2 squares of A. 2 of B. 2 more with A. And we finish with 3 in B. So you might already get a sense of what's easier for you, the written version or the charted version. So I'm going to place another stitch marker because we have finished another repeat. And now I want you to just continue playing around with looking from the written version and looking from the chart. And I'm going to show you some options on how to hold your yarns. I'm going to show you my preferred option first. Well, the one that I showed you is just picking up one strand and then dropping it again, picking up the other and knitting with that. And that is completely fine if you want to do your first colorwork project like that. The only thing that you want to remember is to let yarn A on one side and yarn B on the other side. If you do that, they will not get tangled, which is great. The one thing that people always say about colorwork knitting is, oh yeah, when you use multiple strands of yarn, they will tangle. And they won't tangle if you just keep them one on the left and one on the right. So it's easiest for colorwork knitting to do that on a table. Now, if you also knit continental style, and people also sometimes call this the crochet way of knitting, because you kind of, well, I hold the yarn as if I'm crocheting. Then you can hold one in each hand, and that could be really, really helpful. So you might want to catch your yarn around your pinky finger just to give it that extra tension. Okay, and let's see, we knit 2 with color A. So to knit continental style, I use my right fingertip to knit continental style, I use this needle tip to open up that stitch so I can see the yarn behind it. Then I scoop up that yarn through the open stitch and take it off the needle. So I open up the stitch. So we open up the door, we see the yarn, we go behind the yarn, and we catch it, bring it to the front. Okay, now we've got 3 color A and color B stitches. So I'm inserting, spreading out my stitches, and I'm reaching over with color B. And you only have to do the spreading out part for the first stitch in a sequence. So for the other 2 stitches, I don't need to do that. Then it's color A's turn again. So we open up that stitch, we go behind the yarn, or you might want to bring the yarn forward using your left hand. and taking it through. And another one. There. And then, oh, I forgot my place. So 2, 3, 2. Okay, so now we knit 2 with color B. And then again 2 with color A. And we finish the repeat with 3 in color B. Okay. And another stitch marker. Another way of holding your yarns, say you are more proficient holding it in your right hand or in your dominant hand, and you just want to knit English style with it. And that is completely fine. You take both yarns and you kind of use your index finger to hold them apart. And let me just show you how I knit with it, because that'll give you a better idea. So we insert, and I have color A. I push my index finger, and I push it like this. Okay. Now 3 stitches of color B. I turn my finger and I hook it behind color B, and I pull it towards the needle. And then color A, and again I'm pushing the yarn towards it. You keep spreading out your stitches. Then we change color. I hook my finger underneath the yarn B. And this method of knitting with 2 strands in one hand, it will always be easier if the pattern is, if it's fairly well divided, each color. So here most often we're knitting 2 stitches with each color. So this would be a perfect pattern to test this out. Say if you've got a pattern where you knit 5 stitches with one color and then just 1 stitch with the other, it will be more difficult to hold both strands here, because one will move, you will use one up faster, and it might cause the other one to get kind of like bundled up in your hand. So this is a good pattern to just try it out. Okay, now let's hold both yarns in our left hand. And then I'm not very proficient at this, but the way I do it is I curl one over my pinky finger, then I curl one over my ring finger. See, I'm already getting I tension them around different fingers, and then I hold them over my index finger, and you kind of want to separate them by 1 knuckle. I need 2 stitches of yarn A, so I'm going to open up that stitch and take yarn A through, right? So I'm doing that again. And now I knit 3 stitches with color B. So again, I want to spread out my stitches. I'm opening up this stitch and I'm grabbing yarn B. Then 2 in color A again. And you can see mine have already slid together. You don't really want that, but as long as you can pick the one yarn and then the other, as long as they don't get tangled, it's fine. And again, this kind of works best if the amount of stitches is fairly similar. There. So that's kind of a crash course on how to hold your yarns for colorwork knitting. And again, just try it out, see what works for you. And let's get through this first row of the colorwork pattern. All right, and I'm at the end of my row, and I can see my smaller needles are empty, so I'll put them away, and I'll only be knitting on my 8mm needle now. I'll take my beginning of the round marker again and put it over the needle. And just a note about stitch markers. You are fine to keep these stitch markers on throughout your entire hat. In fact, I think that will be helpful to keep track of where you are in the pattern. Make sure that the beginning of the round marker is something that stands out, something that you can recognize. Okay, this is the beginning of the round marker. We are continuing with our colorwork pattern, and actually in this second row I'm gonna make things a little bit more difficult because we've got purl stitches in the mix now. Whichever way you knit, I want you to consider which hand you use for purl stitches. If you knit purl stitches by knitting them English style, or if you knit purl stitches continental style. And in that hand, you're gonna hold your yarn B. So I'll show you both ways of purling. I'll start off with the English style. So I'm holding yarn B in my right hand. And the first two stitches are knit 2A, because whenever we're using yarn A, we're knitting 2. Then we are knitting 1 in color B, and then we're taking our yarn to the front and we're purling 2. So it says P2B, which is purl 2 with color B. Then very importantly, take the yarn back to the back of your work, because we don't want it hanging around in the front. We have another K2A, then P2B. So we take our color B, take it forward, and purl 2. Keep in mind that you want to spread your stitches apart when you reach across with a new color. And then we take yarn B to the back again. We knit 2A, and now we're kind of mirroring the pattern. So where we had knit 1, purl 2, we'll do purl 2, knit 1, so that it's symmetrical. So we take our yarn B to the front, we purl 2, we take it to the back, and knit 1 with color B. Okay, that's one repeat. Now I am switching which hand I hold the yarns in, because this is my preferred method, because I purl faster when I knit continental style. And let's look at the chart now. So we have 2 stitches in color A, and the squares are solid squares, so they don't have any symbols in them, which means that they are knit stitches. The next stitch is color B, and it's also a solid square, so we do a knit stitch with color B. The next 2 stitches in color B have a dot in them, which means that they are purl stitches. So I'm purling, actually let me show you that in detail. So I move my finger to have the yarn in the front here, then I insert into the stitch purlwise. I bring my finger back up around the needle and back down. And then into the next one, I bring my finger up around the needle and back down. There. And then to the back of the work, so it's out of the way. 2 with color A, and you know, this stitch, this row might be more difficult with purl stitches, but at least we don't really have to check which color to use because we see 2 stitches of color B here, so we already know we need to use color B. And we're purling 2. And then we're knitting with color A. And then at the end of the repeat, we have purl, purl, knit. So that is 1 repeat as well. And we slip the marker again. Oh. And again, maybe you already know what's your preferred style of knitting, or maybe you want to have a go at trying different methods out. And after we complete this round, it will also be easier for us to see which stitches need to be knit and which need to be purled, because they're gonna stack on each other. So you can see the previous round and then you basically already know what to do. We are at the end of round 2. And in the pattern, you can see that rounds 2 through 6, so 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, are all the same. So for the next couple of rounds, we can follow what we did before. And I just want to point out that in this pattern, you might want to use a row counter. We would now set it to 2 because we've just done round 2 of the pattern. So that means we're going to work round 3. And as I said, round 3 is the same as round 2. So wherever we've got a knit stitch, we're going to knit that. And wherever we've got a purl stitch, we are going to purl. Do make sure that if you're knitting magic loop, that you're not letting the full length of that cable slide into your work, because that will stretch out your hat. So make sure you keep knitting magic loop, and I will see you at the end of round 6. Okay, so when you've knit 6 rounds of the pattern, it should look something like this. So you can see those little knit columns emerging. Let's get ready to do a cable row. So in order to do a cable, we need a cable needle. And you have plastic cable needles, you have metal cable needles, you have cable needles in that shape. You can even use, this is actually a sock knitting needle, but it can totally be used as a cable needle. You can also use a bobby pin, like a hairpin, anything really. So, but I prefer to use this one. I prefer to use plastic over metal because metal is sometimes quite heavy, and when you've just got a few stitches on your cable needle, it can sometimes slide out. So I recommend a plastic needle, and personally I like this shape better, but you do you. Anything will work. So let's have that handy. And we will also need one additional stitch marker. So let's do our first repeat. I'm going to look at the written version first. So I'm knitting to A, Then I'm knitting 1B and I'm purling 1B, because our cable is going to be over 8 stitches, and it's going to be these 2 columns plus a purl stitch on either side of the column. And I think this is going to be more recognizable in the next couple of rows. We'll just go step by step. Okay, so we slip 4 stitches onto the cable needle. Okay, and for a cable pattern, you always have to make sure, does the pattern say hold in front or hold in back, because that will influence the direction of your cable. For this one, we hold it in front. Okay, so you kind of want to move it out of the way so you can knit the next couple of stitches. So I'm going to knit the next 4 stitches, and we purl the yarn B stitches, and really make sure that you cinch this part in so that there's no real space between these 2 stitches. Then we knit the 2 color A stitches, and we purl this 1 color B stitch, so that we've worked 4 stitches. Now we take our cable needle again, and you have 2 options here. You can either put them back on the left hand needle, or you can knit them from the cable needle. And here's where it's going to be a little bit tricky, because you want to really kind of stretch this part so that you can knit those stitches. I'm taking yarn B first, moving it forward in between the needles, purling 1 stitch, moving it back, taking my color A, and here you can stretch all you want, but you're not going to spread those stitches apart, so that's fine. So we're knitting 2 stitches, then we're taking color B again, moving it forward and purling. We can set our cable needle aside now, and you can move yarn B. Oh, actually we will need it in the front, but that's our first cable. Okay, at this point, before I forget, we should put a stitch marker on this row, and I'm going to do that in this first color B stitch, because that's going to be easier to count later on. So you just put it around the stitch like this, and make sure that you're using the stitch on this round and not that one. We want to be able to recognize this round later on. And of course, make sure that it is after your beginning of the round marker, so that it is this round, and don't pick that one because that is the previous round. Okay, let's continue. So we just have 2 more stitches to go, and that is purl 1B and knit 1B. That's 1 repeat. Okay, let's look at the chart now. So we have 2 squares of color A, we have 1 square of color B, and then we have a purl in color B. Okay, and for the next 8 squares, you see kind of a slanted line over all 8 stitches. And typically with cable charts, you want to check the legend. You want to check which cable stitch they're actually using, because not all symbols refer to the same cable pattern. So just make sure that you read the legend. So you slip 4 stitches onto your cable needle, because we're going to cross 4 over 4. We're going to work the next 4 stitches as they are. Oh, another thing that's specific about charts, because you see that the chart, the cable is this way, and that means it's kind of a visual representation of the cable. So when you hold the cable needle in front, it will position your stitches like this, and you can see that slanted line right there. If the cable stitch on your chart was like this, it would mean to hold your cable to the back, because then the next set of stitches you would change the order of them, so it would be like this. So it would slant like that. And if this is your first ever time seeing a cable chart, I think that's going to be a bit overwhelming, but it might help for future patterns, that from the legend symbol you can kind of see what the direction is of your cable. Okay, so we are going to work those 4 stitches as they are. So purl 1 in color B, knit 2 color A, and purl another one in color B. And then now I'm going to show you the other option of just putting your stitches back on the left hand needle, because you might find that easier. And this might be very, very tight. So don't worry, that's what it's supposed to be. And that is your cable. And we knit all of the repeats this way. So go ahead and continue round 7, and I will meet you at the end. Round 8 is the same as the rounds that we've knit before, but it's going to be a little more tricky to knit because of the cable stitches. And you want to make sure that the stitch marker that marks the cable row stays put. When you get to the first cable, you'll see that they are very squished together, which is that's what you want for a cable, because for the twist of a cable stitch, the stitches are all bunched up there together, and then they flare back out in the next couple rounds. So we're going to knit them as we normally do. We knit all of the yarn A stitches and purl the yarn B stitches. And this round is going to be a little tight, but the next round is going to be pretty much back to normal again. All right, and once you've finished round 8, you'll go back to round 2 and follow it all through again. So you're gonna work another repeat of this cable chart. And if you're working with a row counter, make sure that after round 8, you're going to go back to 2. And I will meet you at the start of the next cable pattern to show you what this stitch marker is for. Okay, we're getting ready to do the second cable row now. So I've been using my row counter and it says 6, so that means the next round that I'm doing is round 7, which is a cable row. But if you weren't using a row counter, you can also count your rows from your stitch marker. Let me show you how to do that. So we place the stitch marker on a cable round, which means that this round is round 7, which is the cable round. So we've got 7, 8, then 2, because we go back to row 2 for the beginning of the repeat. So 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, which means that the next row going over that is going to be 7, which is the cable row. And you might be wondering, why don't you just count from the cable or eyeball it? That's because cables are notoriously difficult to eyeball, because just before your cable row, your cable, well, the section that you've got will seem so much longer than when you're done with cabling. So if you're simply eyeballing it, there's a big chance that you will do this wrong. So I've put all of these things in place to help me remember which one is the actual cable row. Because the cable row is so twisted, it can be difficult to pinpoint the exact row from where you would be counting. So it's much easier to just place a stitch marker or to use a row counter. It will give you a much more accurate idea of when to do your next cable. For the next cable round, we are just going to be knitting the first couple of stitches. And then we move this stitch marker up, because that will allow us to know when to do the third cable row. And then we knit the row as we normally would. So we put 4 stitches on hold, work the next 4 stitches, and then work the stitches from the cable needle. After you're finished with this cable round, do make sure to keep adjusting your row counter. So you're going to complete the second cable round, and then you're going to do a round 8 to finish this repeat. And then of the next repeat, you're going to do rounds 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I will meet you at the start of round 6 of the third repeat, because then that's where we are going to do the first set of decreases to begin our shaping for the crown of the hat. So meet me back at row 6 of the third repeat. Before we start the crown decreases, your work should look something like this. So you have 2 twists of the cable, and after you last cable, you knit until row 5. So we've just completed round 5. And if you want to count from your cable stitch marker, this marks round 7, which means that's 8, then 2, 3, 4, and 5. So that means we've completed round 5. And for the crown decreases, I've kept it simple and we start at round 1 again. So for round 1 of the crown decreases, we are going to do 2 decreases in each repeat, so in each little section. And we start by knitting 2 in color A. And then we have our first decrease. And if you're looking at the written version, that is SSKB. So it's a slip slip knit decrease with yarn B. And we start at this knit column of yarn B. So we slip knitwise, then we slip another stitch knitwise, then we reinsert the other needle tip and we knit them together. And this decrease will make sure that this column of knit stitches will stay on top of the decrease. Then we work the cable stitches as normally. Okay, we're on the other side of the cable stitches now, and here we will do our next decrease. And for this decrease, we also want the knit stitch column to lay on top. So we're going to do the knit two together decrease here, which is a right leaning decrease. We insert our needle tip through both stitches at the same time, wrap the yarn and pull through. And this decrease is right leaning, which also makes the knit column lay on top. Now that might only be visible from the next round, so don't worry if you don't see it yet. But here's how it should be looking. Okay, so we repeat that. So we slip, slip, knit over the first knit column of the repeat. Then we work all stitches until we get to the other side of the cable section here. And then we knit two together. So you repeat that over all sections of this round, and I'll see you for the next cable row. And if you want to check if you did this round right, every kind of yarn color should have 2 stitches now. So you just have groups of 2 stitches all around. So that makes it quite easy to double check that you did all of the decreases and that you didn't skip a decrease. So in round 2 of the decreases, we are going to do the cable stitch. And we don't have any additional decreases this round. So you just work up until the 8 stitches for your cable. We do the cable. So hold the cable needle in front and work the 4 stitches off our knitting needle, and then we work the 4 stitches off our cable needle. And if you were working on a circular needle but not with magic loop, if you were working on an exact circumference circular needle, I think you'll find that you have to switch to double pointed needles now, because it'll get a little bit too tight to work on your circular needle if it was the exact circumference. Or you could change to a longer cable and do magic loop from now on. So complete round 2, and I will see you at the start of round 3. At the end of round 2, I think you'll find your work to be a lot tighter, simply because we've got less stitches and we've got the tightness from the cable twists. So that was round 2. And for rounds 3, 4, 5, and 6, they are all the same. So we have some easier rounds now. And we have no additional decreases in these 4 rounds. So we just work every stitch as we see them. So you knit all of the yarn A stitches, and for the yarn B stitches, you knit the knits and purl the purls. One more note about these 4 rounds, you might find that your work is a bit tight. So if you feel that stitches are, you're having difficulty sliding your needles in, you can always pull up another loop so that you can move your needle like that. And that might make it much easier to knit sections of it. In round 7 of the crown decreases, we are going to do some decreases on the yarn A columns. So each of these columns, we're going to decrease them into just 1 stitch. And we're going to decrease the 2 stitches on the inside of the cable. For the yarn A columns, we are doing a slip knit. So we're slipping 1, slipping 2, inserting the needle back into it, and knitting them together with color A. Then we are working the yarn B stitches, working the yarn A stitches of the cable, and then the 2 purl stitches on the inside of the cable, we are purling them together. So take the yarn B forward, go through both of the stitches purlwise, and we work those stitches together. And then we work the next couple stitches as they are until we get to the next column of yarn A stitches, and we slip, knit them together. And you can see I've got my 2 loops out of the circular needle. Now, as we're doing decreases, you might encounter that one of the stitches is on this side and one of the stitches is on the other side of the loop. And in that case, I just pull on the needle tip, and a little bit further, I pull out another loop so that I can complete the decrease. In round 8, we've got another decrease coming up, and this time we are decreasing over these 3 stitches, so the middle 3 stitches of the cable, and I'm going to guide you through that step by step. So we are knitting the yarn A stitch from the column, and then we are working towards the middle of the cable. So we have these 3 stitches coming up. What we've got coming up now is called the double decrease, and it is worked in 3 steps. We slip 1 stitch knitwise, so as if to knit, slip it off the needle. Then the next 2 stitches, we knit them together with color A, like that. And then the previous stitch that we've slipped, we go under it with our left needle tip and pull it over the middle stitch. And then you've got this really nice decrease that is coming together and it's kind of closing off the eye of the cable. Okay, so let's do that again. We work all stitches as they are until we get to the next eye of the cable. So you've got these 3 middle stitches of the cable. the first stitch, which is a yarn A stitch, we slip it knitwise. Then the next 2 stitches, we are knitting them together with yarn A. And then the slipped stitch, we go under it and pull it over the middle stitch. And that's how you do the decrease. For round 9, we're going to be decreasing a lot of stitches, so you'll only have a couple left at the end of this round. So we start by just knitting 1, and then for the next 2 yarn B stitches, we are going to do a slip slip knit. So we slip 2 stitches knitwise, and we knit them together with yarn B. Then over the 3 yarn A stitches of the cable, we're going to do another of those central decreases. So we slip 1 stitch knitwise, then we knit the next 2 stitches together, and then we pull the previous stitch over. For the next 2 yarn B stitches, we are going to do a knit 2 together, like that. And that is 1 repeat of your pattern. So each repeat should only have 4 stitches when you're done with this round. So we knit the yarn A column, we slip slip knit. Then for the cable, we slip 1 knitwise, knit 2 together, and pass the slip stitch over. And then we have a knit 2 together. So go ahead and complete round 9, and then we'll do round 10. So at the end of round 9, you have just 1 stitch of each color in a row, which is another way you can check to see if you're on track. And then for round 10, we are just going to knit across. We've done all of the decreases, and now we just knit each of the stitches in the color that they are. And at this point, I'm not bothering with stretching out the stitches before I change color, because we want to cinch in the crown of the hat anyway, so it doesn't matter if they're bunched up here. All right, it's time to finish our hat. So we cut both strands of yarn. I leave around 20 centimeters, which is around 8 inches. And then we tuck the yarn A strand to the inside, and the yarn B strand, put that through a darning needle. And once you've done that, we'll go through all of the stitches on the needle. So we're taking them off the knitting needle. And it's easy to just leave them on the cable and go along the cable to kind of catch all of the stitches. Once you've gone through all of the stitches, you can take out your knitting needle by tugging on the cable there. And then we take our yarn B end and we cinch our work closed, and this is always my favorite part. There we go. And because our stitches, or because our yarn is quite bulky, we won't be able to close it all the way on the first pull. But don't be tempted to just pull, because you can break the yarn. So instead, we are going to go through the stitches again, but fewer stitches. So we are skipping 2 stitches and then going through 3. And take care not to split the yarn, because then it might get stuck. So just pick up 3 stitches, skip 2, go through the next 3. Oh, might have split it there. Skip 2, go under 3. And we do that until we're back where we started. Okay. Then we pull on our work again. And we're going to go through the stitches one more time. And by now it's getting difficult to count the stitches. So just pick up a stitch or 2 every once in a while. And once you're happy with it, go through the hole at the top and take the yarn through to the inside. So from the outside it looks like that. Oh, take care to remove any stitch markers. And then on the inside of the hat, we can weave away these ends. And what I like to do, because we've got so many horizontal loops here because of color work, is to kind of weave through them. So I weave so that I'm away from the crown bit, and then I go under each second float, and then go under the opposite floats. And it just makes weaving in the ends a little bit more fun. And then for the ends at the start of the hat, I'm going to look at the outside of the ribbing first, because I want things to look good on the outside. So with this end, we are going to go under 2 loops on the other side. And I was waiting for this to happen. With these kind of blown yarns, sometimes you'll want to go through with your darning needle, but it gets caught. If that happens, turn your darning needle 180 degrees and push, because then you'll be able to take it through. So we cinch that in, we go back through the other side, And then we just want to close up that gap, which I'm going to do on the inside. And I'm just going to use a kind of zigzag method to attach those sides of the split together. Check on the right side if you're happy with it. And then we can weave in the end further. And here I'm doing the same kind of weaving method. And then I'll do the same with the other end. Okay, that is the end of our hat. So our opalite hat is all finished. All of the ends are woven in, and the crown looks very nice. I'll show you the crown of my other hat as well. So this is the first colorway, and this is the second colorway. I just love how it looks at the top as well. So feel free to attach a pom-pom to your hats. Feel free to block it. It doesn't really need a block, but if you want to get those cables more defined, you could, give it a little wash. And for hats, I always like to block them on a balloon so that they're not flat. So that's our opalite hat. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this video was helpful, and I hope to see you in another one of my tutorial videos. Bye-bye!